screen starts glowing and the film starts rolling. You wanna be knowing what you might be in for. So give the show a listen and find out what you're missing. Put yourself in position for the is a good score.
One podcast to rule them all. One podcast to find them. One podcast to bring them all, and in the movies, bind them. Hey everyone, this is an extra super duper special episode of The Goods, a film podcast. And it is special for a handful of reasons. One of which is we are recording live in person. Normally, we are virtual with Zoom when we record. Today, we have three of us in the flesh, in the same space. And that's right, three of us, because we have me, this is Dan, and we also have our usual co-host, Brian. Say hi, Brian.
Hi, Dan. You lose some points because you didn't say the opening in black speech.
Oh. And thirdly, we have my brother, Will.
Hi, everybody. It's good to be back.
Will's been on many times before. We try to have him on a couple times a year. We have been looking forward to this extra special episode with Will for a long time now. So today we are going to be discussing The Lord of the Rings, specifically the Peter Jackson directed trilogy from the early 21st century. And I think the structure of this is we'll do a little bit of context setting and then we'll kind of have two halves to the episode. The first half will be me, being Dan, the least experienced Tolkien person, which we'll get into a little bit in our context setting. I'm going to tell you, I've broken each of the three movies into a recap, and each recap is 10 bullet points. So just so we don't get bogged down in hours of recapping, 10 bullet points per movie. And I'll do one bullet point at a time, and then Brian can correct, or we can discuss items within that recap bullet point. And then, after we've done all three recaps, we'll do a overall discussion. We've brainstormed a handful of topics related to Lord of the Rings to discuss. So, that's the agenda for today.
Right, and there's a couple reasons we're getting a little loosey-goosey with the format. One is that we're trying some structural experimentation overall, trying to make the program a little more fleet-footed. But also, longtime listeners may remember, we have done a Lord of the Rings episode before. About 2 summers ago, we covered the animated films, the Rankin Bass, Hobbit, and Return of the King from the 70s, as well as Ralph Bakshi's Lord of the Rings adaptation. So we've trod this ground before, but we're never ones to stop from covering additional adaptations. After all, we've done 20 Christmas carols. So we have room, I think, for a second Lord of the Rings episode.
So let's set a little bit of context. Whether or not you've listened to our animated Hobbit 2-parter episode from back in the day, what you should know is that I guess one corner that I've taken as a movie fan, as a movie lover, is being a Lord of the Rings skeptic. Now, that's not the same as being a Lord of the Rings hater, but it does kind of come off that way because pretty much everybody likes Lord of the Rings, and being a skeptic is kind of tantamount to being a hater. And I had seen Fellowship of the Ring at least twice. I'm pretty sure I saw The Two Towers twice. As I watched this week, I gained confidence that I had only ever seen Return of the King once when it was in theaters. I've never read the books. Tolkien's world and world building had just kind of always bounced off of me for a number of reasons. It's too dense in some ways for me. Too many names and factions and stuff. And we can maybe dig into why I might have have felt that way and might still feel that way to some extent. And if that's shifted at all, I guess. But I kind of did some bad mouthing of Lord of the Rings that episode and Tolkien. And sometimes it feels like Tolkien, my take at the time was it feels like Tolkien goes out of his way to make extra stuff up. And that doesn't need to be like invented names and lore and words for things. And my brother, Will, big time Lord of the Rings fan. Not the only one, but he's a big one. And he's like, you know what? We got to do it right sometime, guys. We got to correct this injustice. We got to dig through it. We got to have a back and forth that's not just a skeptic. And Brian is kind of a middle ground. So Brian, why don't you briefly describe your relationship?
Yes, well said. Basically, ever since we did that last episode, Will has wanted to be here, so I want to give him the time to speak his piece. And I am kind of I don't know if impartial middle party is the right term, but something like that. I watched the films when they came out in theaters, which this week I was thinking that that's almost like a quarter century ago. It's getting to be a while. But I watched Return of the King in theaters twice. And then I didn't really watch them or think about them much for like 15 years. But then in 2018, I got the extended editions on DVD at a yard sale. And I watched them. And I fell asleep during Return of the King. And then I tried again in 2020 during the pandemic. And I watched them all. Got to the end of Return of the King. And just felt more of an appreciation for it than I had before. And pretty much every holiday season since then, I have watched the trilogy. And so I watched them at Christmas, which was around, I guess, the time this past year that Will was really pushing, because it had been a while since he joined us on the show for something. He's like, this is the time. Let's slate this on the calendar. And so pretty much ever since like the last 6 months, I've kind of been thinking Lord of the Rings. And I did go ahead and rewatch 4 this week, so they are fresh in my brain.
And I guess that leads to me, Will. So yeah, I would consider, I am prone to hyperbole, but I would not say that, this is flippant hyperbole when I say that the Lord of the Rings movies are my favorite of all time. And I have a few core reasons that we can get into more into the discussion section. But basically, it's a combination of the normal things that make something favorite, like nostalgia and sort of specific personal tastes. Plus, around high school, I got very into fantasy literature as a whole. And I think it's basically impossible to have a strong appreciation for fantasy literature in, the English-speaking world without holding some reverence for Tolkien. And then as I write fantasy books and I read a lot of fantasy stuff, and I've kind of alternated between obsessing over the more epic world building, those types of fantasy novels versus, other types of fantasy novels. But essentially, you can trace the lineage of a lot of really popular fantasy and really the sort of the fantasy landscape back to Tolkien. And so for that, I have an appreciation of him in terms of influence and historical standing. And then also, as I've gotten older and I have read the books, not just watched the movies, and read more about Tolkien. I recently read a biography on him in preparation for this podcast. But I appreciate more the sort of thematic depth and emotional depth of the movies and the type of story that he was trying to tell and why he told it in this way and how it links up with some of his other work. And so I would consider myself to be a large fan of Lord of the Rings. I'm not a super obsessed, like somebody who can speak Elvish or anything like that. But I am somebody who holds the books in high esteem and has a great fondness for the movies in all of their parts. Yeah, and I love them, and I'm looking forward to talking about them, even if I, am not necessarily... if you guys don't like them on the same level that I do, that's all right, because everybody has their own taste. But I'm looking forward to stating my case either way.
So why don't we say which versions of the films that we watch? Because like Brian said, he used the phrase extended editions. And I think what's kind of happened over time. So, well, let me take a step back and say there are two editions of each, to my knowledge. There's the theatrical edit and then the extended edition. So the theatrical edition runs a total of about 9 hours and 15 minutes or so. And it's 3 hours, 3 hours, and 3 hours and 15 minutes. The extended editions were only released on DVD, never in theaters. I mean, they may have been for re-releases, I'm not sure, but they are much longer, to the point that I think the third one is like over 4 hours, even before credits. And I think over time, in general, the extended editions have become kind of the consensus canonical editions, particularly for people who like the movies a lot. They tend to hold them in high regard. Like I have a friend group that once a year does a Lord of the Rings marathon, and they time it so that they do like all the Hobbit meals during the day when the Hobbits, because they have like 6 meals or something like that, and they'll watch the extended editions. And to my knowledge, it's only ever the extended editions. So what versions did we watch? And maybe we can talk about overall as we kind of get through the recaps, like what are the biggest differences between them, and like how do we feel about theatrical versus extended? But what versions did we watch? What about you, Brian?
Yeah, so I did watch the extended this week. I thought I might watch both just so I'm not referring to things that anybody missed out on. But my experience with these is, so, around about 2001, I got a DVD player at my house. And so there was a short window in time where like big movies would come out, and then I'd try to get them on DVD. And that was a span of like 2 years, maybe. But it overlapped with when these films were coming out from Peter Jackson. And I picked up the Fellowship of the Rings DVD in like mid-2002, and I watched it. But there was this special feature on the disc, which was an ad saying, oh, next month you can buy the extended edition. It's like, this is bullshit. Why did I waste $20 on this when it's not even the full thing? What a gimmick. So I never got another Lord of the Rings DVD until 2018. Like, I just thought this was complete malarkey. That we gotta buy the disc again to really like get the DLC for this movie. But yeah, pretty much since then I've watched extended editions.
Will, what about you?
So I'm certainly more familiar with the extended editions in that probably for about the last 10 years, they were the only ones that I watched. But I am an Amazon Prime subscriber, and the ones I watched this week were the versions on Amazon Prime, which surprisingly are the theatrical releases. So over the last couple of days, I've watched all three of... That's actually not true. Sorry. I've watched The Two Towers and The Return of the King theatrical release. A couple of weeks ago, I believe I watched the extended version of Fellowship of the Ring, which I have seen many more times than the second or the third one, so I'm more familiar with it. So I was comfortable not watching that one this week and still being able to talk about it. But yeah, so I guess, oddly, I watched the extended edition for Fellowship and the theatrical version for The Two Towers and The Return of the King on my most recent watch. I also fairly recently read the first two books. I've read them all once. I've read the first two twice now, and I'll probably read the third one at some point in the near future again, but yeah.
I've also read the first two books since the last time we talked Lord of the Rings.
So I watched the theatrical editions. It's kind of odd that the extended editions have become canonical. Maybe not odd. That's maybe not the right word, but there's just some wrinkles to it. So like one is often you'll hear extended editions be called director's cuts, but it's kind of ironic here because the theatrical edits were the ones that Peter Jackson designed to be consumed by like mass audiences. So in some ways, the director's cut are actually the theatrical editions in this case. And I tend to think one of my corners, my movie loving corners, has been that extended editions, like 90% of the time, are worse. I have never seen the extended editions of Lord of the Rings, so I cannot speak to that. So my recaps are only the theatrical stuff, but maybe if there's some really important points, we can call those out. There's a lot of story in these movies. I don't know if it's worth hitting every single story point, but
I was just going to say that if there's any movie or trilogy of movies that it makes sense that there is like these big extended editions, I would say Lord of the Rings, with its reputation for being dense with lore and having a whole bunch of stuff going on under the surface and really being a sort of sprawling fantasy epic. I would say it makes more sense for these movies to have extended editions than just about any other film.
sure. Particularly with devoted fans who want to see their stuff brought to life. And one last thing that I'll say, probably obvious to pretty much everyone who likes movies and knows these stories, which if you're listening to a movie podcast, you probably are pretty well familiar with Lord of the Rings and the background. But I think these are generally regarded as very faithful adaptations, not to the letter. There's some discrepancies, some rearranged material, but in general, you'll see them regarded as among the more faithful of the big ticket adaptations of blockbuster adaptations of books. So any other opening thoughts, context setting before we hit the recap, guys?
I wanted to shout out the Lord of the Rings pinball machine, so they had this down in the basement of the William and Mary Campus Center when I was in college, and it was the only pinball machine they had. So I played it a lot. And this was between like 2008 and 2012. And so this was something that came in kind of the dark ages of my Lord of the Rings experience. Like I wasn't really watching or thinking about the films other than playing this pinball machine. And it kind of gave me more of an appreciation for the story. I could tell that whoever worked on the pinball machine was like really invested in these movies. And they like used a ton of material from it. They used all the music and like character voice snippets. And they like used the audio kind of cleverly to refer to things that were happening in the game.
So was it a pinball machine that covered like the events of the entire trilogy? It wasn't just one of the movies?
Correct. It was the whole trilogy.
That's kind of cool.
The Peter Jackson trilogy. I also feel like John Rhys Davies is always down for a paycheck because he also narrates the pinball machine as well as the Indiana Jones pinball machine.
Yeah, I never really... So I know it's kind of a thing, but I never really got how pinball machines kind of have stories and like sequences of going on. Because I suppose I don't have the exposure to it besides ringing bells and balls bouncing on. What are the bumpers and stuff like that? Yeah. But I suppose there can be nuance even in the depths of a pinball machine.
I think the appeal of pinball, not to go on too far of a tangent, but it's like a finely crafted physical thing that it has like gizmos and gadgets and that are sensorially pleasing. So you think about it, it's like, well, it's not as cool as a video game. A video game, you can do whatever, but like that's just on a screen. A pinball machine is like a physical thing in front of you that you're actually bouncing the ball around. So it's got kind of its own thing. To your point about whether it can tell a story or not, I think the better ones have like events kind of trigger things that are like abstractly representing events in a story kind of. So
right.
I kind of get it.
It's like hit this target to advance along path A. And so it's kind of like an interactive novel
so you
in
can
some ways.
Shoot the ball into the mines of Moria or something like that.
Exactly.
Or
the path of the dead.
Or it's like a board game representing a story.
Right,
kind of.
right. Yeah, and just one more thing on the topic of related media. When I was a child, probably my most Lord of the Rings, like my largest consumption for Lord of the Rings related media was in the form of video games. We had, I believe, the Two Towers GameCube game, which was a blast. It was kind of like a combo-based fight. It's not a fighting game, but like an action game where you would run through levels and unlock moves and press A, B, A to do a double swing with your great axe as Gimli or something like that. And that was always fun. And then also there was one, it was called Lord of the Rings, The Third Age, which was a JRPG for the GameCube, where you were basically, the premise was you were another dude from Gondor forming a party that mirrored the Fellowship, and you were always one step behind the Fellowship. And it would always have these intercuts of like very poorly rendered scenes from the movie that were super low quality and had like sort of not very crispy audio just because it was on a GameCube thing. It was like they stuck in a little video file to play between levels. So I remember several of those. Quite funny.
Well, let's do the recap here. So just a little more on the recap. Like I said, 10 points per movie. This is me being Dan, okay? So like, I guess let me just say that, like I opened this episode by saying, a little bit of a skeptic of Tolkien, came in really not knowing too much about the lore. One item that Brian likes to quote is when we were talking Tolkien and like trying to parse through it. At one point I asked, who the hell is Gondor? I have now learned that Gondor is not a person, but a place or a faction or something like that. So this is me having watched the movies, writing down like what I can remember of it. So part of the exercise here is that Brian and Will can correct me or add their commentary as I kind of go through, as I've written the recap in my voice here. So I'll go 1 point at a time, get all the way through my point, and then you guys can respond. Okay. So we're going to start with Fellowship of the Ring. So 1, this movie opens with a flashback. Way back in the olden days, there were, I think, 9 rings, magic rings. There was also 1 super ring. And this bad guy named Sauron, he had the super ring, but a human king defeated Sauron. I don't know what species Sauron is or was, but the human defeated Sauron, claimed the ring. And when it was time to destroy the super ring, the bad ring, he instead, the human king that is, became corrupted by the ring. And this triggered a sort of widespread moral decay, fracturing of alliances. The ring got lost. And we know by the start of this story that a little freak named Gollum eventually recovered the ring and had it for a long time, leading into The Hobbit, which precedes Lord of the Rings. So that's the setup.
So there are 9 human rings. So Sauron makes a whole bunch of rings. So the Sauron's moniker is the Deceiver, because we can go later into what and who exactly Sauron is. But basically, he was this guy, or angel more accurately, who taught the elves how to make these rings of power. And then they made a whole bunch of them. And then he made one specifically to control all of them. So there were 3 for the elves, 6, or so, is it 6?
7 for the
7 for the dwarves, and 9 for the humans. And the elves resisted the corruption. The dwarves kind of halfway did. That's why they became so money greedy, was because of the corruption of the rings. And then the humans, the 9 human kings who got the rings, became the Ringwraiths, who are obviously significant antagonists, especially in Fellowship. And Sauron, when he made his ring, it was kind of like a backdoor, super like, oh, I'm taking over your other rings and I'm going to exert my influence over you. And so that's who Sauron is, and that's what the specific ring thing is. He consolidates his power in the ring and uses it to control the other rings.
And I feel like we don't see the dwarf rings at all after this prologue, but we do see the elf rings.
Yes, we do.
We do?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
Galadriel has one, Gandalf has one, and does Celeborn have one?
Is it, what's his name? Is that his name? Celeborn?
It's either Celeborn or
Yeah.
Celeborn.
The guy who was with Galadriel and Lothlorien. So those 3 rings. You at least see the ring bearers. Gandalf, he conceals his ring on his finger, I think, but he does have it. And then Galadriel has one, and I guess it's not her husband, but the dude who also rules
basically
Lorien.
It's like her. What do they call it when you're a king or a queen? You have your consort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He also has one.
Okay. All right, so that's the prologue. Point 2. Flash to the present. We're now in Hobbit Town, I think in the Shire. And Bilbo, who was the hero of The Hobbit, which preceded this, he lives with the 1 super ring. And it helped him come out on top in The Hobbit because he stole it from Gollum. But little did he know that this ring that he has is actually the super dark evil ring. And it's so powerful that it's not even entirely sure what the power is. It's unspeakable. And Bilbo is ready to retire to his lonesome with his ring. And in a way that we kind of come to recognize as being sort of Gollum-ish, like he's kind of going and running away with his little precious treasure. But first, before he retires and goes away, he's going to throw a big birthday party.
His 111st birthday party, specifically.
So what does that mean?
111.
Okay.
Yeah, you got that about right. I think it's basically said he's leaving all of his wealth behind, not just... So I believe even he plans to leave the ring behind, because Bilbo was the... So also it's Hobbiton, not Hobbitown. So it's not 2 words, it's 1 word, but you got it in broad strokes, yeah. So the Shire is the region, Hobbiton is the town they live in, and Bag End is the name of his manor, which is the specific one. Yeah, pretty accurate, I would say.
I just really love the introduction of the Shire, the Hobbit area. Great way to start a movie.
I agree, and it really... So I think it does so much to sort of set the standard for the sort of provincial life that the hobbits are used to, especially as we follow our party of the 4 main hobbits, and especially Frodo and Sam, as they go from, this pastoral, really nice, sort of the countryside dream life to literally in the depths of what's basically hell, throwing, surrounded by lava and brimstone, and because of the soot in the air, they can't see the stars or the sun or anything like that. So I think it does a fantastic job of sort of establishing their status quo and what they remember and what they want to return to.
Yeah, it sets the stakes. What are they fighting for?
Right.
Point 3. Gandalf, the wizard, shows up and coerces Bilbo into giving the ring to Frodo, who I think is his nephew. Coincidentally, this is about the time that Sauron, the bad guy from the flashback, he has come back as some sort of super evil spirit that is represented as a giant eye on a tower. And Sauron has convinced the most powerful wizard in the land, who's sort of maybe like a buddy or a boss to Gandalf, and this is Saruman. So we have Sauron and Saruman. Saruman is a human now. Or not a human, I don't know if he's a human, he's a wizard, played by Christopher Lee, and he's on Sauron's side. So he's been convinced by Sauron to join the bad guys. And the whole thing is Sauron really, really wants the ring and is getting Saruman to marshal forces to get the ring for him.
A couple things. First of all, I don't know if coerces is the encourages. Gandalf doesn't coerce. He's a good guy. And then so you described it as a coincidence, and I think part of the sort of understanding is that it's not really a coincidence, but it's just the ring. The ring has a will of its own, and it's sort of impacting the way these events flow here. And Sauron has been gathering power for a long time, but then, in the books, what happens is after the party, Gandalf finds Gollum and questions him about because he's still not sure it's the One Ring. So Gandalf is trying to question Gollum about the origins of the ring, but then Gollum gets captured by Mordor and tortured, and that's when he says the ring is in Hobbiton. So basically, in the book, there's a long period. There's 17 years between between the party and when Frodo leaves.
That's what I was
Yes.
going to say. Is Gandalf's trip to the library takes 20 years.
Yeah, he's gone for a long time.
His Morgan Freeman from Seven library scene.
Yeah, so there's a big time skip that happens in the book that does not happen in the movie.
It seems like it's the same day practically.
Yeah, it feels like it's literally
Like a
the next
weekend.
day. Gandalf gets back. He's like, okay, actually, this is the big evil ring. I Googled it, and they said that's the bad one.
I Hobbit Googled it.
Yeah.
All right. Point number 4. Sauron sends, or possibly Saruman, sends some evil ring hunters called the Ring Wraiths. So Will mentioned them a minute ago. To get the ring from Hobbit Town. Frodo and 3 of his Hobbit buddies run off with the ring, and after some close calls getting caught, they meet a scruffy, handsome human ranger named Aragorn, who's going under the codename Strider right now. We will quickly learn that this ranger is actually Aragorn, not Strider, and he is the secret son, I think, of a dead and possibly disgraced king. So he's actually the rightful king of a place, not a person, a place called Gondor, which I thought of as human faction number 1. So Gondor is human faction number 1.
That's fair enough, I would say, to consider them. They were definitely one of the 2 human kingdoms in the trilogy. So he's not the son of the disgraced king. It's like 2,000 years later. So
Okay,
he's
so
like
he's a
the
long
heir.
descendant.
Yeah. He's the descendant of Isildur, who's the guy who kills Sauron the first time, cuts off the ring off his hand, and then who was corrupted by the ring. So that's why they went into hiding, was the sort of the big alliance of men broke when Isildur was killed.
And my question, which I haven't found the answer to yet, so maybe, Will, you can tell me,
Maybe.
is were there any real deal kings of Gondor since Isildur until Aragorn? Or is it only stewards in between that whole time?
I don't think there were any king. Maybe Isildur's son might have been king for a while, but I'm pretty sure basically right after Isildur, because Isildur gets killed along, I forget what the river is called. It's the river they go to at the end of the Fellowship of the Ring.
The first one, that's the Anduin.
Yeah, the Anduin. And the Tolkien fans are gonna not like that. I don't think there's any kings after Isildur. Because what happens is there's this big kingdom there's the two originally there's Numenor, which is the island kingdom, and then when Sauron convinces them to invade the gods,
As one does.
yes, Numenor gets sunk into the sea, and so but the good humans come back and they form Arnor and Gondor, and those kingdoms kind of split up into Rohan and Gondor, and I think there's at least one more that does not really get mentioned in the chronology of the Lord of the Rings. But yeah, so Gondor, as far as I'm aware, has not had a king since Isildur.
People in these have long memories.
Mm-hmm. It helps when elves live for thousands of years, so they can be like, "Oh yeah, Isildur, I was there. That was my buddy until the ring corrupted him."
It's a good meme. I was there, Gandalf. I was there 3,000 years ago. You can use that interchangeably with "It's been 84 years" from Titanic when you're thinking back, perhaps, on movies that came out 25 years ago, and it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah.
There will be a Titanic connection, of course, before we're done here.
Of course.
All right, so point 5. They all make it to Elf Kingdom 1, Elf Faction 1, Rivendell. Turns out Aragorn, I guess he grew up with the elves, and he's got a hot elf girlfriend named Arwen. And Gandalf, he had disappeared for a while because he confronted Saruman, who banished him to the top of a tower, and then eagles came and rescued him. That's kind of a little side quest that happens. But Gandalf is now at Rivendell. So we're all at Rivendell. A group of good guys from different species and factions all get together. And, okay, we got the ring. Frodo's still got the ring, and he's there too. What are we going to do with this dang ring? So that's point 5.
Yeah, and for Gandalf kind of showing up there, it's not as clear in the movies because I think even from the outset, Saruman comes off as rather villainous because that's just Christopher Lee and like the way Isengard is. But the original title, I'm not 100% sure I heard this. The original title of the Fellowship of the Ring was The Betrayal of Isengard. So it's supposed to be kind of reveal almost that Isengard betrayed the good guys because they were supposed to be like the wizards are essentially angels who have been dispatched by the gods to chill on Middle-earth and sort of guide the people around. So the fact that Saruman, who's supposed to be the top dog wizard, turned evil is not a good thing. And it was sort of, catches Gandalf at least off guard. So he's not going to confront Saruman. He's going to be like, hey, what should we do about this whole ring thing? And then they have the greatest wizard battle ever on screen. And they're like, whoa! Oh, they get tossed around, and he spins around and flies into the air.
The doors magically close.
Yeah, and he tries to keep going, trying to go to different doors, but they keep magically closing.
I think after the third one, he'd be like, all right, the fourth one's going to be... Nope, the fourth one closes too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I also watched some of the documentary material. The extended edition DVDs have also got discs and discs of featurettes. Mm-hmm. So I learned some things about the production that I hadn't seen before, and it was really cool to see the behind the scenes. I'm definitely going to express appreciation for all the work and detail that went into just making these movies exist.
Yeah, there's a funny part of the behind the scenes where they're in Isengard and Christopher Lee is trying to get up the stairs. Like, I can't walk up these damn stairs because he's got this really long flowing cloak on.
They should have included that in the movie. Saruman can't walk up the damn stairs.
Yeah. But yeah, we kind of, I feel like in the movie, Bree, which is the town they stop in, takes up a decent amount of time. But yeah,
Oh, where they meet Strider?
yeah, they stop in the human town. It's actually like a human / hobbit town-ish. Bree. That's why they have hobbit-sized beds and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
I really like that it's this border area where the hobbits and the humans coexist, and so all the infrastructure is made for that. And that's something I didn't catch the first time I watched the movies, but it's like this is really cool.
Like they've got the low table, and they've got the when the gate guard opens the second eye slot to see them. But yeah, so the Nazgul obviously come and try and kill them there.
So are the Nazgul the same as the Ringwraiths? Are they one and the same?
Yeah, they're just different. I think that might even be like an Elvish word for Ringwraith.
Yeah,
or something
Naz.
like that. Yeah.
Naz is ring,
Yeah.
and Ghoul is Ghoul.
Yeah. Naz equals ring, Ghoul equals Ghoul.
Like the Simpsons.
Yeah,
monorail.
yeah. Mono equals one, rail
Yeah.
equals rail.
So sometimes, and I'm going to interrupt myself here because I sometimes interrupt Brian and I'll be like, let's talk about the experience of watching this, not just what happens. Because the experience of watching the Fellowship of the Rings is they get to a place and either orcs or Nazgul show up. So like every single one of these places, just imagine either an orc or a Nazgul shows up at some point.
Yeah, especially for the first half, it's all the Nazgul are like chasing them around until they get to. Oh yeah, we completely skipped over Weathertop.
What's Weathertop?
Weathertop is where Frodo gets stabbed.
Well, is
One
that,
of the places.
is-
The
is
first
that-
time.
Is that different from Bree?
Yeah, so Bree is where they meet up with Strider, and then they're running, and then they go to Weathertop, and then do you remember Frodo stomps on a bacon fire at one point?
Bacon fire.
They're making fire, and
Oh,
they're like
yeah.
cooking, and Frodo's like, "Put the fire out!" And then he steps on it, and then the Nazgul show up, and he puts on the ring to try and escape, and that's when you see like the ghostly visages of the king. Then he gets stabbed. I love
Right.
the Weathertop sequence in the movies.
That's where the ring flies up and like sort of lands on his finger.
Yeah, no, that's in Bree, but it's
Oh,
when he's
okay.
trying to get away after
Oh,
when
yeah,
they're like
yeah.
in camping out
Yeah.
in the middle of a field
Aragorn has a big sword fight where he manages to fight off all the
with a torch
all
as
the
well.
ghouls.
I will say the first movie in particular, and I think this is probably especially true in the theatrical, although I haven't seen it, but I imagine this is extra true. It's like it's getting from place to place to place to place so fast that like it kind of feels compressed. Like
Yeah.
I don't know if I fully processed that those Bree and what top
Weathertop,
were different incidents.
Also in the book, the Weathertop is one of like 3 things that happens in really rapid succession.
Yeah.
And they trimmed the fat a bit because it's like they get trapped in a tree and Gandalf saves them, and then they get trapped in like a barrow where there's ghosts down in the hole in the earth, and they
It's not Gandalf who saves them, it's Tom Bombadil, who is probably the largest removal from the books to the movies. At least from the Fellowship, certainly, where Tom Bombadil is like this dude from a children's poem that Tolkien wrote before, and he doesn't really jive with any of the other lore. He's just like this jolly old guy. The ring doesn't affect him, and like he says he's the oldest thing in Middle-earth, so some people have posited that he is God, or like at least a physical manifestation of nature. And you'll read crazy Tom Bombadil theories just because he doesn't really fit in with the other lore. But yeah, as Brian mentioned, they get trapped in a tree, and then Tom Bombadil comes and sings the song and yells at the old man Willow or something like that. And then they have a party with him, and then they leave, and they get trapped in these barrows, which are like tombs for spirits, and then Tom Bombadil smashes through the ceiling and saves them again after they sing a song, and then they go to Bree, I think. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that gets lost in there.
yeah, so they did streamline it a bit.
Yeah.
Right. It still feels like we're kind of rapid firing place to place with a lot of running from stuff between. But one thing I want to add is that Peter Jackson was a horror director before he did Lord of the Rings, and you get some of that especially in parts of the Fellowship, with like the Nazgul and the sound design, the way they shriek, and how they sort of come in and like when they're stabbing the pillows, and it's eerie. I think it's legitimately pretty creepy, especially if it's the first time you're seeing it.
I think you get it in all 3 of movies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and every once in a while, somebody who wasn't a monster will become a monster.
Yeah.
It's like we get Monster Bilbo,
Oh,
and
yeah,
Monster
Scary Bilbo.
Galadriel.
Yeah.
That freaked me the F out when first time I saw it. Scary Bilbo.
Jump scare Bilbo is there, yeah.
And
And then they end up, after they do all that, yes, they go to Rivendell, and they've got the big, the Council of Rivendell.
all right, so that's where we are. So point 6, they decide they're going to destroy the ring, but the only way to destroy the ring is to bring it to the faraway and dangerous volcano Mount Doom. Great name. There's like it's a whole spectrum of Tolkien names ranging from Mount Doom, the extra dangerous volcano, up to some of the elven names that are kind of out there.
Yeah.
On the opposite end. But when they decide they're going to destroy it, they can't decide at first who's going to be responsible for taking it there. So they bicker a little bit, but finally Frodo volunteers to do it, even though initially he was just going to get it to Rivendell. So a group of people who are here volunteer also to help guide him to get to Mount Doom. And so we make a cross-species and cross-faction fellowship of the ring, if you will.
Remember when this happened in the Warhammer movie, guys? They had some kind of council.
The Warcraft movie. Yeah, they did, and then the answer to that question is no. I do not remember it because that movie is not particularly memorable. But did you catch it? There is exactly one line in the entire trilogy that Legolas says to Frodo. It's when he says, "You have my bow" at the Fellowship.
Oh.
Other than that, they never speak to each other the entire trilogy.
Interesting. And so here's here is the Fellowship, by the way. So it's Frodo. It's his 3 Hobbit buddies, Sam, Pippin, and Merry. Then we got Aragorn. So he's the Lost King of Gondor, Human Faction 1. We also have Boromir, who you might recognize as Ned Stark. And he's the son of the Steward of Gondor. You would think it might be a guy from Human Faction 2, but no, it's another guy from Human Faction 1. It's the son of the steward of it. We also have a handsome elf named Legolas and a comic relief dwarf named Gimli. And lastly, we have Gandalf. So I think, is it 9 people?
Yes. 4 hobbits and 5 non-hobbits.
Okay.
So basically, if Aragorn never comes back, Boromir is going to be the king. In all but name.
He's the steward.
He'll be
He's
the
not
next steward.
Yeah, there's definitely in Tolkien's world, there's a lot of significance placed on kingship and like being the king. And so although he might rule Gondor, the steward is not the king. He's not like the one. There's more abstract king stuff that gets removed. Like at one point, Aragorn is healing people by laying hands on them and stuff like that. But that stuff gets removed from the movies, and it just Aragorn becomes like, the Giga Chad. Whereas Boromir,
he's kind of a self-insert character. Maybe not self-insert, but he's like your
Mary Sue.
Yeah, or equivalent. He's all the girls want him. Everybody likes him. He's the super king, and he always wins battles.
Yeah, and
he's got the biggest sword of all.
It might be an exaggeration to say all the girls want him, considering there are exactly 3 girls in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and I guess 2 of them want him.
I thought it was really funny in the documentary. Well, the one that I watched was mostly interviews with the actors cobbled together. I guess there's also another one that is more on the filmmaking side, the crew. But the conversations with the actors, they talked about how this whole thing, it's all dudes. It's basically like a Boy Scout camp or working on a submarine. And then like 1 week of the 15 months, there were going to be girls there. Like we had to change our whole mindset. It's like we had to clean up.
That's kind of funny.
Yeah.
All right, point 7. So the Fellowship starts journeying off with the ring towards Mount Doom. And like I said, they're constantly hiding from orcs and ring wraiths and all that. And it turns out that Saruman the Wizard, one of his tasks is he's marshaling this big orc army. And the orc army is out hunting for the ring too. So this is where the orcs pop up.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Point 8. To avoid the orcs, the Fellowship decide to go underground to the cursed Mines of Moria. And I like the way that Gimli says it. The Mines of Moria!
We could go through the Mines of Moria. My cousin Balin would give us a royal welcome. Ripe meat off the bone.
So they go down there, but still somehow the orcs find them. And now they're fleeing through the Mines of Moria, trying to get out of there. And then a demon shows up. And they kind of battle the demon, and it looks like they're going to all escape. But then Gandalf gets kind of sucked down to hell by this demon guy. Everyone else does manage to escape, though. So we think Gandalf's dead.
Yeah, this is the biggest sequence of action in the Fellowship when they are in Balin's tomb, and you get the reading. It's like drums in the deep. They are coming. It's again kind of eerie, and then the troll shows up. And it was interesting in the production. They were talking about. I also watched a lot of the background material, and they talked about how the goal for the troll was it to be less evil and more animalistic, so you almost feel bad when it dies. You know how like the way it kind of groans and it falls down? It's like it's not supposed to be a huge moment of triumph.
It occurred to me as I was watching that like a lot of iconic lines and memed lines are from this series, especially the first movie, but all of them. So you have "You shall not pass," and you have "I have no memory of this place," which is one that I say out loud fairly frequently, even though I haven't watched these movies too many times, but it's one that I like.
And there's "It is a gift." There's "One does not simply walk into Mordor."
Oh yeah, we forgot about that one. That's what Ned Stark says.
Yeah. And then there's the classic, like, old ancient YouTube meme of they're taking the hobbits to Isengard. I guess that's in the second one, isn't it? Yeah.
And then "You have no power" here. That's the second one.
Yeah, that's also
right?
the second one.
Yeah. What I remember about this first movie, seeing it in theaters, is really this Khazad-dûm sequence. All the fighting on the bridge. The way that there's all the orcs coming out of the cracks and like cockroaches and they swarm in, and then there's like the big noise and they all scuttle away again. It's like, oh shit, something really bad is coming. And just the scale of everything. This is a movie that you can only really appreciate on the big screen. Like if you watch this on a tablet or a phone, you're not going to get it because there's so many extreme wide shots with like 10,000 people in them.
Yeah, and they do a lot of stuff where like the characters will be really small and then you'll have this giant vista behind them. Like in Moria, you get the giant columns, and when they're walking through that, and like the little patch of light where Gandalf is standing, it just is illuminating this giant area.
And it's like sometimes the case with the columns, it was too impossibly large for me. It's like I can tell this is like a PS2 render.
Right.
But I think a lot of the time they hit the balance right. Like the way that the castles are in the battles with Minas Tirith and Isengard. It's like, this is really cool. And I had never seen anything like it before when I saw these when I was 11 and 12.
Right. If you watch like bad fantasy movies, it's a lot of interior shots where stuff is pointing downward so you can't see what's up. Or it's like, you don't get these huge, massive, there's no sense of scale really compared to what happens on screen in The Lord of the Rings. And they really do a fantastic job of sort of layering the matte paintings and the computer generated stuff with the actual physical models and stuff like that. And you'll see that they'll have like 3 versions of a set. They'll have the miniature, I think they call them like megatures, which are like or bigatures, I think is what they call them, which are miniatures but a little bit bigger. And then they'll have the actual set, which will be a portion of it. And they will have these camera moves where they're like, oh, the one is, I think it's in Fellowship, when they go down into the pits of Isengard.
That's my favorite
That whole
shot.
sequence is so cool because, and if you, like how they actually do it is so interesting, the way they're layering all these different elements and to make something that looks pretty seamless, and it's just, there's so much depth of what you see as it's traveling, the camera's traveling through these
That's
areas.
when they're making the orc army.
Yes.
I think one thing that you guys said there that I just want to point out is that this came out, I think it was 2000, 2001, 2002, or 01, 02, 03, something like that. So it was right as computer graphics were coming of age, but like weren't kind of just the way you did absolutely everything effects-wise, which is what it kind of is now. And so you really did have this blend of practical effects and computer effects that some of it was just like Peter Jackson going all in, like super high effort and high energy production and using what was then cutting edge, but also just like the nature of the times was like you kind of had to use practical and CGI, VFX stuff. Whereas if you compare that to the reputation of like the Hobbit trilogy that Peter Jackson did after this, it got bad reviews, and part of it was people said everything just looked like bad CGI, compared to that really interesting blend of production from the Lord of the Rings. All right, so point 9, the Fellowship, they get out of the mines and they're bummed that Gandalf died. But now they make it into, I think, another Elf Kingdom. So this is Elf Kingdom 2. And this is, I think, Lothlorien. And it's ruled by an absolutely ravishing Cate Blanchett, who's like the super elf. I guess I didn't realize she had one of the rings. That explains why she's a super elf. And she warns, there's like some business with like mysticism there. But basically she warns Frodo that Boromir, Ned Stark, is going to try to steal the ring. Or like to beware him, basically. And then they leave. They're not there too long. They leave, and what do you know? Ned Stark, Boromir does try to steal the ring, like within a few minutes of screen time after that.
Yeah, just another. They do such a good job of making the elf areas like very dreamlike, and it's especially pronounced in Lothlorien, where it's like you're in you're in a kingdom of twilight where it's like everything is super illuminated. And one of the things they did in the production is in the books, they talk about how when you look in Galadriel's eyes, you can see like constellations. So what they do in the movie is instead of lighting it with a single light, they basically got a bunch of Christmas lights almost, and they pointed at it. So if you look at her eyes in the movies, you can see like these individual pinpricks of light. So it's supposed to look like you can see constellations within her eyes. And I think Cate Blanchett is perhaps the most elf-like woman on the, like, she is perfect for an elf, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do feel like it's a little redundant that they're stopping for R&R again at another elf forest city.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess, there's different human cities in the real world. You could go to Chicago, you could go to New York, but it really feels like it's set up like a D&D campaign. It's like you go out on a sortie and then you come back and you're recharging here. Then you go out on another mission and you come back. And it's like 2 evenings of gameplay.
Yeah.
Right. And I want to say my point about Boromir stealing the ring kind of it splits bullet point 9 and bullet point 10 of my recap. So we'll get to that more. But I kind of like this idea that it's interesting, and I feel like almost underexplored in the movies, that you could use the ring to do good. And like right now we're facing insurmountable odds, and we have this powerful weapon at our disposal that we're just trying to get out of the way, trying to be gone. But like there is philosophically the idea that, hey, you could use this to stop the evil, to bring good forces back to the forefront. And I kind of think that's a pretty interesting concept.
Yeah, and I think, so there's certainly that idea exists, but I think one of the points that Tolkien is basically making is that in attempting to use this power, it is corrupting. And like even Galadriel talks about it, how she would ultimately be even like Galadriel, who's like top dog elf, probably like super pure, very like strong, like very robust character, she would eventually be corrupted by this power. So I think it's primarily presented as a temptation to use this power to do good, but ultimately I don't think, or at least the way it is portrayed, is that it would be folly to try to use the ring to do good, because you would inevitably be corrupted by the power.
Right. And yeah, anybody who used it would go bad. We talked in our previous Lord of the Rings episode that something I found interesting in the Rankin Bass was it showed like a fantasy sequence of what if Sam took the ring. And that would be crazy because he's like the most wholesome character. But even like the way that he is evil is like wholesome. It's like gardening focused. He's like a garden focused dictator. And I love that they put that in there because I had not thought about that. Let's see. The point. Ned Stark. I think one of the biggest differences in the extended editions is there's more Boromir scenes.
Yeah, you definitely get more Boromir.
And there's like whole conversations between him and Aragorn that really like flesh out what Boromir is about and like makes him more human and a little bit more of a good guy.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he kind of gets the short end of the stick in the movies because he's second best basically after Aragorn. He's awesome. It's just his whole thing is he is very concerned with the well-being of Gondor. And as a result of that, he's like, I want to use this to protect my kingdom. And that ultimately is what leads to his downfall. So it's not just that he is, like, you kind of, if you think about it, it's like, oh, he's the one guy who we see in the party fall victim to the ring. But at the same time, he was part of the super elite council and joined, and he was the one chosen. And he's the son of, Denethor. So he's supposed to be like this human champion who ultimately gets corrupted by it. And I also just think the whole sequence is extremely well acted by Sean Bean. Mm-hmm. It's like he's really good, and then of course you get what I imagine you'll cover in point 10.
Right. So at the same time as Boromir is trying to take the ring, like a bunch of chaos happens at once. So some orcs attack, and Frodo like frantically scrambles away, and Sam manages to link up with Frodo as Frodo's kind of running away. But the other two hobbits, who are Pippin and Merry, they get kind of kidnapped by orcs or like attacked by orcs. But Boromir here, so he's kind of there as the orcs attack, and he sacrifices himself, gets shot by a whole bunch of arrows, protecting the hobbits. They still get captured, I guess. But it is kind of like a moment of redemption. It's like Boromir realizes that he had been ensnared by it, and that he kind of gets out of that, and then like protects the people around him. And the way that the movie ends then is Boromir has sacrificed himself, Sam and Frodo ran off, and Pip and Merry captured, and the rest of the Fellowship is going to set out to rescue Merry and Pippin. I guess they realize that Frodo and Sam need to do this journey by themselves. I don't know why it took them this long to realize that, but they kind of were like, all right, let's let Sam and Frodo go do their thing. We're going to go rescue Pippin and Merry.
Yeah, so in the books, they spent a little bit more time reasoning it out, but basically the logic is that after Frodo sees that Boromir gets corrupted, he's like, okay, this is going to happen to everybody, so I need to go by myself. And then Sam forces his way along with him, and Frodo's like, okay, you can come with me, Sam. And in the books, they're like, okay, we can either abandon Merry and Pippin and go after Frodo and Sam, but Frodo and Sam chose to leave without us, so we're going to respect their decision and go after Merry and Pippin, who they don't know if they're dead. And also, in the books, Boromir basically dies off screen.
Oh, really?
They show up into a clearing, and there's like 20 orc corpses around him, and he's been hit by a bunch of arrows, but it's not like... He still has a final little conversation. He doesn't have the iconic, I would have followed you, my brother, my captain, my king, which is a great death line. But yeah, he basically dies off screen.
But Will, you spoke really highly of this scene in a previous episode.
Oh, yeah.
I had you on.
I put it as my favorite fight scene of all time. I admit now that me putting that, I was like, oh, I'm going to just talk about Helm's Deep. And then when we made our rules for it, we were like, oh, it's not a battle scene, it's a fight scene. So I had to figure out a different one. And this one really, it's just the whole sequence is awesome. First of all, you get the really active camera work going through the forest as the orcs are running through, and we sort of get these sort of high velocity shots of different people fighting, and we see just the whole sequence of Boromir getting shot and then continuing to fight after he gets shot, and then Aragorn comes in and has the gruesome fight with the captain of the Uruk-hai group. I love this scene. Yeah.
It is cool. Lots of like slow motion, dramatic. The beats where one arrow will hit him and he'll be down on his knees and he's like, no, I'm going to keep going. It happens several times until he's finally down.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the Uruk-hai for a second.
So are they the orcs?
So there are a variety of orc.
Yeah.
They are day-proof orcs.
Yes.
And they were made by Saruman. And the movies kind of skirt the issue a little bit, skirt the weirdness of this.
Mm-hmm.
So they definitely lay out that this is bad industrial science that's producing these monsters. But they kind of show them like hatching out of mud pits. And they're not really talking about how they get made. Maybe it's a spell, mm-hmm. or like, it's almost like he found them, like he's mining orcs.
Or they're potatoes that he planted in the ground and grew into orc people.
But, okay, orc people. That's what Uruk-hai means. Orc men. And the way that these came about, like, there is discussion in the fandom, but like the 90% consensus opinion is that these are half-orcs. They are orcs bred with humans. And, like, Saruman's got this, like, orc eugenics program.
Huh.
Which, downplayed in the movies, I think we should point it out.
Yeah, and because one of the big features of orcs in general is that they don't like the light.
Oh,
and so
okay.
the Uruk-hai, who are
And they're small. They're goblins.
Right. Yeah, goblins are basically interchangeable with orcs.
Huh.
So, and then there's also the black orcs, I think, are the ones from Mordor. They're like the big dogs. But then, the Uruk-hai are bigger and also made to be able to travel through the day. So they're kind of like super soldier-ish.
And they're the
orcs.
guys that get like the white handprints?
Right, because the white hand is the sign of Isengard.
Okay.
Yeah. Whereas the lidless eye is the sign. So in the books, there's no actual physical eye of Sauron. It's just his symbol.
Interesting. I didn't know that. Well, we made it to the Two Towers, movie number 2.
Oh, just a couple of things that I thought of. You say a demon comes out. That's a Balrog, which is technically originally the same thing that the wizards are. They're all... So in the Tolkien lore kind of emulates Christian lore in that there were the Valar, or the Vala, I guess, would be they're like the top angels. And then there's the Maiar, which are the angels underneath. And Gandalf and Saruman and Sauron and the Balrogs are all Maiar. And the Balrogs and Sauron are bad. And I guess Saruman eventually. And then the wizards were like good ones. And then Sauron used to serve Morgoth, who was essentially Lucifer. That's like the first age. That's the old stuff. We can talk about it more later if we want to talk about what Sauron is, but yeah.
Moving right along here, we made it to movie number 2, The Two Towers. So, bullet point 1 on this one. So, status quo, we open this movie, The Two Towers, split across 3 parallel bits of action from the Splintered Fellowship at the end of Fellowship. So, thread A, Sam and Frodo have kind of run off to try to get to Mordor to destroy the ring. Thread B, Legolas, Gimli, and Aragorn are trying to rescue the other 2 hobbits, which is thread C, Merry and Pippin have been captured by orcs. But The Two Towers actually opens with a flashback, as do all 3 movies. In this case, the flashback is actually just something that happened in Fellowship. We get a little bit more info on the death of Gandalf. We kind of see him struggling with and I didn't quite know what to take away because it's supposed to be a little bit ambiguous because we're going to get a surprise reveal of what happened to Gandalf.
Yeah. So I have a lot of feelings about this. Well, we'll get there. We'll get there.
I do love this sequence just in a purely, it's really awesome, the falling, and then like the sword, he holds out his hand and his sword comes back to his hand.
Yeah.
And then they're fighting in the air, bouncing off rocks, and you get this awesome scene of like the fiery things falling through this giant open space into this body of water, which I always thought it's a very cool sequence.
I think it's cool too. And we never saw a body, right? Gandalf fell. And even the rest of Fellowship, that's how they talk about it is, oh, he fell. Mm-hmm. And like Galadriel does kind of like a soul search. She kind of like Googles Gandalf through the ether, and she's like, I don't sense his presence.
Amazon status update.
Gandalf is offline.
And it's not that he died, it's that he's unaccounted for.
He's gone.
He clipped through the boundary. His collision is off.
The big mine, he kept on falling for like a long time, it seems like.
Right, and he's a wizard. He's got magical abilities. So I'm willing to accept that he like guided his fall like Luke Skywalker on Cloud City, and that he's not down for the count. He's not dead.
Right.
Except, well, we'll talk more.
One thing that I'll just say here is that I kind of became a little more at peace with it by the end of the trilogy because there's so much action going on. But I didn't like that the 2 biggest deaths in the Fellowship happen at the end of book 1. We got Gandalf dies, we got Boromir dies, and it feels like those should be like among the 2 biggest deaths of the series. And they both happen in the first part of the trilogy and like within 15 or 20 minutes of each other.
That's a fair enough.
It's not that they run out of stuff to do in the rest of the story, but it feels like those beats could have been a little bit more spread out. Like,
right.
I kind of always liked in the trilogy fashion, the second part of the trilogy needs to end where you feel like your safety net is gone. Like,
right.
So that's where, in my mind, logically, Gandalf should have died. But I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you, in the books, Boromir dies in the second book.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the first book ends when Frodo leaves. So it's like the first chapter of the second book, but it is in the second book nonetheless.
One last thing on the books. Isn't it like each of the 3 books is broken into 2 halves? So
yes.
It's really like 6 books of The Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, so in the first book, it's sequential. And I believe in the second and third book, the first book is the rest of the Fellowship, and then the second book is Frodo and Sam,
Gotcha.
if I'm not mistaken.
All right, so anyways, that... bullet point 2, we'll start with thread A, which is Frodo and Sam. So they meet Gollum. Gollum shows up. He's kind of lurking around here and there, but now he's going to be with them. And he's still really coveting the ring, which we know that he owned many years ago. And he basically is like, all right, Frodo and Sam, I'm going to navigate you to Mount Doom. Except he doesn't say it in the way that I just said it. He says it in his weird Andy Serkis voice where he introduced like a whole syntax to the American Cultural Lexicon.
Yeah,
The magic pearls so nice and cool, so juicy, sweet.
And he's smashing the fish on the rocks and stuff like that.
And he like uses plural to refer to himself, like we. And so yeah, this obviously was like a whole. Everybody had a Gollum voice around the time of the Lord of the Rings. But they encounter lots of close calls of getting caught and danger but mainly like this thread, honestly, major portions of 2 and 3 is like, not much happens, but it's like they're kind of reckoning with the weight of the burden of carrying the cursed fate of the world around your neck, and like dealing with friendship and temptation and treachery amongst all of that. They do eventually get captured by a group of guys, and we don't immediately know if they're good or bad. But eventually we realize they're led by a guy named Faramir. So he's the brother of Boromir, Ned Stark, who died in the last movie. So we'll learn a little bit more about Faramir as we go. But that's bullet point 2. Bullet point 3, Frodo repeatedly spares Gollum, like over and over again. Like somebody's like, we should just kill Gollum. He's kind of bad. And he's like, no. We got to say, have mercy upon him. And basically trying to convince everyone there's still like some humanity within there. And constantly Frodo is like barely resisting the thrall of the ring over and over again. And something will snap him out of it. Like Sam will help him or something like that. And then there's kind of a moment where he comes face to face with a ring wraith and he's about to put it on, but then he doesn't. Like Sam's like, don't do it. And so he doesn't do it. And they escape the ring wraith. And Faramir witnesses this. And we also get some hints that he's like tempted by the ring. And when he sees this, he lets Frodo basically be free to complete his task of going and destroying the ring. And again, I'm kind of doing this as like, here's thread A. This is something that kind of spans most of the movie. Mm-hmm. And this kind of thread kind of ends with Gollum plotting a plan to betray Frodo and steal the ring.
Yeah, so you mentioned that Frodo repeatedly spares Gollum. If you remember in the first book in Moria, at one point they notice that Gollum is following them. And then Frodo says something akin to, it's a pity that Bilbo didn't kill him when he had the chance. And then Gandalf goes on, he has this great speech. He says, pity. It was pity that stayed Bilbo's hand. He says, many who live deserve death, but many who die deserve life. Can you give it back to them? And so he's like, Gollum has a part to play. So I think a lot of Frodo's sparing of Gollum, it was inspired by Gandalf sort of imparting this idea that, you can't, once you kill somebody, you can't bring them back, and they might still have something to do with this. So, and plus, obviously, it's made very apparent that Frodo sees a lot of himself in Gollum, yes, especially as the ring bears heavier and heavier down upon him.
Right. This is the ring bearer pipeline.
The Frodo to Bilbo to jump scare Bilbo to Gollum.
Yeah. And I want to think about at the end, I want to talk through like what are the repercussions and or like narrative payoff of Frodo essentially letting Gollum live like 5 times across it, because I struggled with that and I think I have an answer for it, but it's kind of interesting. All right, so that was thread A. Bullet point 4, we're going to move over to thread B, which is Legolas, Gimli, and Aragorn. So they're hunting for Merry and Pippin, and as they're doing this, they bump into an army we're finally meeting human faction number 2. So this isn't the one that Aragorn leads. It's another human nation, and this is Rohan. And this faction, their thing is that they're like horse riders. They're associated with horses.
The horse lords, they call them.
And they're kind of isolationist at this point, I gather. Like they don't bother helping out other people. They just kind of protect themselves. And they're led by this king who has become kind of cursed and very decrepit and doesn't really look human anymore. And he's the guy who says, "You have no power here." Because what's going on with him is he's being manipulated by this really slimy, sweaty advisor guy named Wormtongue.
Grima Wormtongue is his name. The most trustworthy name I can think of.
And we're going to come to learn that he's a lackey for, I think, Saruman. Mm-hmm. And remember, Saruman's the super wizard played by Christopher Lee. So that's what's going on with the Thread B group. And, okay, bullet point 5 here of the 2 towers. Now, Legolas, Gimli, and Aragorn, they've met the Rohan. And at some point, they're like still looking for Merry and Pippin. And this is where we get the big reveal. They go into the woods.
You don't mess with the Rohan.
Yeah.
They go into the woods, and then they happen to bump into Gandalf. Gandalf's alive. We're shocked. He's been resurrected or somehow survived all of the carnage from Book 1 and the prologue. And his magic's been promoted from gray magic to white magic. Don't quite know what this means, but it's good. And he's now rejoining the Fellowship. He's going to go back to helping the Fellowship. And so they go to the Rohan guy with Worm Tongue and the really creepy cursed king, and they banish him with Gandalf's new white magic. And so now we kind of get into like a new, more stable version of Rohan, where you have a normal king, and I think his name is Aoden?
Theoden.
Theoden's the king?
Theoden is the king.
And he's got I think his daughter, the princess, Eowyn.
I think it's his niece,
Yeah,
actually.
his
Niece?
Yeah.
Okay. And she makes goo-goo eyes at Aragorn. But remember, Aragorn's got an elf girlfriend who is Arwen.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, there's some angst going on in the elf-human relationship as well. They're kind of like reckoning with like, maybe a person who lives 100 years shouldn't be in love with the person who lives 5,000 years.
Aragorn's actually 88 years old or something in the books.
Really?
Yeah, because the Númenóreans can live longer, so he's long lived for a human. Where
Yeah,
I think
he's
Eowyn's
got,
like 20.
Well, biologically, I guess. Yeah, and like she's old. Elves are.
No,
Elves
sorry,
live a
I said
long time.
Eowyn, not Arwen.
Oh,
Arwen's
yes.
like 3,000.
That's another confusing thing.
Yes.
Similar names.
Saruman and Sauron, Eowyn and Arwen. But
My
Yeah.
favorite, Smeagol and Deagle.
yeah, the cousins. The sequence where they show up at when Theoden is still corrupted, when they show up and they're like take all of the Fellowship's weapons, and then you get the whole you wouldn't part an old man from his walking stick, and they're like, fine, you can let you in. And then there's like the thugs come out, and in the background, Gimli, Legolas, and Aragorn are beating up the thugs while Gandalf just strides forward to talk to the king. I always love that sequence.
Yeah, that bugged me. That Wormtongue is like in charge at this point, and his instruction is don't let the wizard in with his staff. And they're like, oh, well, if it's a walking stick, all right. It's like, dog, I gave you one rule.
And you hear him in the background, he's like, his staff, I said to take the wizard's staff.
So, Brian, you had some thoughts on the resurrection of Gandalf.
I did. So, all right, so he falls down. They really effectively build to that Gandalf is going to die in part one. He has like his heart-to-heart with Frodo where he's imparting the wisdom. And this is his Obi-Wan moment, is he's going to fall and then the hero's going to have to proceed on without him. But, okay, we don't see the body. Falls down into the hole, falls down into the darkness. We get this awesome opening to part two where he's battling the Balrog, and then he's got to climb up out of the bottomless pit. That's all fine. If that's how you want to go with it, I'm okay with that. He didn't actually die. He's just down for the count for a bit. He's coming back, and he just had to climb the mountain back up out of the abyss. Except, then he says, but I strayed out of time and thought or something. It's like, actually, he did die, I guess. But then he had an extra life because he's an angel.
Yeah, so it's definitely abstract, but I guess the theory is that while he was fighting, like, they fought basically to the death, him and the Balrog, and then they exited, and he, like, I think they fought for eternity is one thing that happens, but it's, like, fake eternity, it's outside of reality eternity, and then he comes back, and that's why he says, Gandalf, oh yeah, that was my name, because he forgot, because it was so long, it was an eternity ago was the last time he was Gandalf. So,
Yeah, it's like Dragon Ball Z. You can go train in a black hole.
yeah, and then he got sent back, and they were like, your job's not yet done, get back in there. Put me in, coach. So he comes back as Gandalf the White.
I just wanted a little more concrete.
Yeah.
I either have him die or don't have him die. But it's some
can't do
nebulous.
both.
Yeah, it's in between.
It's very abstract. I agree with you there.
All right, so kind of wrapping up thread B leading into the climax. So, bullet point 6, we have Theoden, he's healed. We have Rohan, and he somehow realizes that the orcs are going to come. The orcs are going to come go attack Rohan, and this is no good. So he gets all of his people together. He's like, we're going to be attacked. We got to go to our super fortress. Our super fortress is Helm's Deep. So the humans, all of the Rohan people, I think it's like the Rohirrim.
Yeah, the Rohirrim, the riders of Rohan.
Yeah, they all head over to Helm's Deep to prepare for. There's going to be an epic siege battle of the orcs coming in to attack Helm's Deep.
Yeah, the nuance of this conflict is that Theoden has kind of been absent. Like, he has not been a good ruler. And so Gandalf and Aragorn are like, just summon your men and go meet them in open battle. He's like, nobody's going to come because I've been bad. So instead of asking for help, let's go hide in a corner. And that's what he does. Okay. And he's like, it's worked before, it'll work again.
And Wormtongue had sent their best warriors away, kind of into exile.
Yeah, remember he banishes, what's the guy's name? Eomer. Who's the guy who plays Judge Dredd and Billy the Butcher. What's his name?
Carl Urban.
Yeah, Carl Urban.
He's in The Boys.
Oh, yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And he's also in Lord of the Rings.
All right, bullet point 7. So now we're on to thread C, which is Merry and Pippin. So they're the two other hobbits. They manage to escape the orcs, and they run into the woods. And when they're there, they meet Treebeard, who is an Ent. And he is a walking tree with a beard, in case that wasn't clear from Treebeard. And after a little bit of reluctance, Merry and Pippin manage to convince the Ents, the walking trees, that no, you can't just chill in the woods and be peaceful because this is going to impact everyone. You got to go fight against Sauron and Saruman. So they strike out, and their plan is they're going to go attack Saruman's wizard tower. So this is like a kind of a sneak attack while the orcs are going to attack Helm's Deep. So this wizard tower is kind of vulnerable to the walking trees.
Yeah, and the way it plays out is that Pippin tricks Treebeard, basically, because he knows, they talk about the trees a lot, and he knows that Treebeard's going to be mad when he realizes that Saruman has burned down a whole bunch of the forest. So they show up at this ravaged landscape, and that's what convinces them to attack. And it's got one of my favorite lines. He says, the closer we are from danger, the further we are from harm. And then Treebeard says, that doesn't make much sense to me, but then again, you are very small, which is just a funny line in isolation.
Brian has sent that to me as a meme before, because I'm shorter than Brian.
Yeah, so now is the time I want to talk a little bit about that. The use of big, small effects in this movie is very cool. You've got humanoid characters, some of whom are big and some of whom are small, and they're all coexisting, especially in the opening scene in Hobbiton, that Gandalf comes to Bilbo's house.
Yeah, with the house.
And all of that is so cool. The way they do that, a lot of it is forced perspective. Some of it is green screen. A lot of it, I learned from the documentary, is also they just have, people of large and small statures in costumes. So it's like a little, a person with dwarfism or something has got like literally an Orlando or a Elijah Wood mask on their face.
Wow.
And it's like you show him from a low angle from behind, so you don't really see the mask face. And then sometimes you just got like a tall person and you're just looking down over their shoulder. Anyway, all of that to say that sometimes when I visit Dan at his house, I feel like Gandalf come into Bilbo's house, whack his head on the beams.
Yeah.
Just because like I put my shoes down next to the shoe rack, and it's Dan and his wife who's shorter than Dan and their two little girls, and so I sometimes feel the perspective change.
Yeah, there's a lot of, and if you watch the production, there's a lot of concern about sizing things. Like I was talking about how they have different size, like miniatures and the bigger version and the actual sets, so there's all that stuff. And then there's also, like at the end of the Two Towers, when they collapsed the dam to flood Isengard, that was a practical effect where they had like a medium-sized dam that they pulled apart and put back together for that effect. Oh, and we mentioned in the first movie that a lot of Boromir gets cut for the extended editions. In the second movie, a lot of Ent stuff gets cut, I think, for the extended editions. You get a lot more the Ent Council doing nothing. Like, there's one scene where they're like, it's been hours. They're like, oh yeah, we just finished exchanging pleasantries. And they go back to their next bit of council. So there's more Fangorn Forest and stuff. And the trees show up at the battle. The forest spreads and eats the orcs at the end of the Two Towers.
Yeah. I like the Ents. Imagine, though, that you got to spend $100 million making a movie called The Two Towers, and then the 9/11 attacks happen.
Like 2 months before the movie's supposed to come out.
Well, since you brought it up, I want to bring up that I don't like. It's a good name. The Two Towers is like, it's catchy, it's cool, it makes you like it inspires an image, but apparently it's not clear what the Two Towers actually are. Like, if you had told me, I would have said, oh, it's like the Helm's Deep fortress where there's one thrust of the climax, and it's Saruman's tower where there's the other thrust of the climax. But it turns out that it's not that, and apparently like there's even some debate about like what the Two Towers actually are, because there's a lot of important towers in the world, and they all are like playing some role. So it's like, why is it just the two towers? What are the two towers, you know? So what is it actually supposed to be? It's Saruman's tower, and the Eye of Sauron is the other tower?
That's what I always interpreted at Barad-dûr, which is Sauron's fortress, and Isengard, which is Saruman's fortress. But I think there's a third one also in Mordor that it might also be, but I don't know.
Oh, yeah, and there's one that you don't see till the third movie or something.
Yeah, with the green laser tower in the third movie. Yeah.
In Minas Morgul.
Yeah, Minas Morgul, that's it, you know. But you glossed over, I don't know if you're going to come back to it in point 10, but Helm's Deep as the whole sequence is just, it's like, I feel like it's a third of the movie.
Oh, yeah, that's point 8. Bullet point 8 is the climax.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
Okay. So, bullet point 8 climax, 2 battles. Okay, so let's talk about the Helm's Deep battle. So the orcs attack Helm's Deep, and we get much more out of the 2 battles, with the Ents attacking Saruman's tower and the orcs attacking Helm's Deep. We get a lot more of Helm's Deep. And this is like really epic. It's shot in the rain mostly. And the gist of it is like the orcs come, they have massive numbers, more than the humans. And over and over again, it seems like the orcs are about to overpower, and then something shifts in the dynamic, whether it's a new arrival or like a new surge in spirit. So like one of these is, I think it's right about it as the battle's starting, but surprise appearance, the elves come. The elves from Kate Blanchett's Elf Kingdom. So that's Elf Kingdom number 2, where Lothlorien, I think it is. Mm-hmm. So Kate Blanchett's like, no, you gotta go help the humans because Sauron's bad. The orcs are bad. There's also a bit, I guess, I got a little confused about where everybody was, but I think at this point, Aragorn and Gandalf are at Helm's Deep, and they like surge into battle. They're like, all right, let's fight, guys. And like one of them's like at dawn. We're gonna do our big epic push at dawn.
So what happens is when Theoden decides they're going to go flee to Helm's Deep, Gandalf is like, this is a bad decision. I'm going to go get reinforcements. Look for me on the 5th day at dawn. I'll come with reinforcements. So he's not there for the vast majority of the Helm's Deep.
So he's not
shows up at the end with reinforcements. Whereas Aragorn is like the figurehead, because it's not really explicitly stated, but a recurring thing is that Theoden is like doubting himself, and people don't actually have any confidence in him because he was sort of vacant at the rule. And so as a result of that, everybody is putting their faith in Aragorn. So he's sort of the one actually leading them. Because you remember, he's the one who convinces Theoden, he's like, right out with me, right out and meet them. And then he also is the one who holds the door while they are rebarring it and stuff like that. So yeah, Aragorn is leading from Helm's Deep while Gandalf is getting reinforcements, is basically what they're doing.
And I will say this is probably the most epic battle in the series, but there's like 3 epic battles in Return of the King. So there's a little bit of like a diminishing returns. It's like, okay, we're going to do a lot of epic battles. But this is the one that kind of really takes your breath away, I think.
Yeah.
In part because it's got that cool effect of being shot in the rain. So it's got like this element of like doom and Armageddon to it.
It also definitely feels the most hopeless, I would say. Probably because it's at night and in the rain, yeah. And just you get the orc army, I think because it's in darkness, feels so like endless in the Helm's Deep siege.
Yeah, and this is the first time we see this kind of crowd effect that they could do with the computers, where it was like, assign 10 behaviors to orcs and then multiply it using kind of like a seed that makes it a little different from cluster to cluster, and you can just create these enormous armies.
These convincing looking enormous armies.
Like,
somewhat randomized effects, so they look like they're individual actors.
Yeah, it's like they kind of have an artificial intelligence to the way that they move, and it's really cool and well done.
Yeah, and then it's just also, you get the whole, like, them pulling the children away from their mothers to arm them and stuff like that. It's definitely a very stirring sort of lead up to the battle, and then you get all the classic lines like, "You'll have to toss me. Don't tell the elf." And, would you like me to get you a box? And what can men do against such reckless hate?
Legolas snowboards down a staircase on the shield.
That's pretty awesome.
It's his first bullshit Legolas moment, is snowboarding down. Oh, actually, he has one earlier in the movie when he scoops himself up onto the horse during the warg battle.
Here's where I'll say, I guess, that Legolas and Gimli basically have no bearing on the plot of these movies. Legolas is cool looking, and Gimli is funny. That's like their purpose. They're part of the Fellowship, and one's cool and one's funny, and they're buddies.
I thought you liked Vulcan skulls.
I no, don't get me wrong. I do enjoy them. I actually think they're good like screen presence. But it occurred to me, I was like, so when did they get their big arc? And they don't get a big arc. Is the answer. Yeah.
It's mostly that different races can be friends.
Yeah.
Assuming they're both white men of
Yeah. What is
varying stature.
better racism allegory, Legolas and Gimli or zombies from the Disney Channel?
Well, you brought up race. There are not too many people of color in this cast. And I think some people, like over time, have kind of said, you know, it does kind of seem like the good guys are always like the epitome of white purity. And not that the orcs like are black people or like people of color, but like they're kind of depicted in features that are like more ethnic, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there's that, and you could refute that saying, oh no, the orcs are monsters. They're not people. Except there are humans in Sauron's army, and they're from Africa and Asia.
Yeah, they're the people of the East or whatever, and there's the whole men of the West. And I think a lot of that is, in my view, somewhat anachronistic, where we've sort of imposed a lot of... Because Tolkien was like born in the 1800s, British guy.
Sure.
So he probably only... And his whole mindset with writing the Lord of the Rings, the whole Middle-earth mythology, was he was like essentially fabricating a mythology for Britain was his whole thing. So I think a lot of that stuff ends up being superimposed. But it's definitely, you know, it's there.
Yeah.
There's definitely all the protagonists are white, and all of the people, the wicked men of the East and the orcs themselves have darker skin and such. But yeah.
And that battle, by the way, ends with like after this final charge, the orcs kind of run away. They end up in the woods, and the trees are also there in the woods. I thought they were doing the other battle, but they're there. And you're like you were saying, Brian, they kind of squash out the orcs.
Yeah, I think in the extended edition, they imply that the Ents are going to go fight Isengard, but the forest itself, the trees are they've got business with Saruman's army or something like that.
It's like, so when they retreat, they don't escape.
They get destroyed by the forest, yeah.
All right, so then bullet point 9 is now we're at the other battle. So this is Saruman's Wizard Tower. And the walking trees with Merry and Pippin come, they do the battle, and they win the battle there. And basically, they imprison Saruman and Wormtongue, and they're just kind of gone from the rest of I don't think we see them die, but they're like gone from the rest of the story.
Yes, the most glaring omission from the extended editions in the theatrical cuts is you see Saruman die in the Return of the King extended edition, but you do not see it in the theatrical.
What about
cuts.
Wormtongue?
He's the one who he stabs Saruman a bunch of times, and Saruman falls and dies. You don't see Wormtongue die, but he's like a lackey, so
yeah,
he gets somewhat of his resolution.
Yeah. So I think that's definitely the biggest thing that's missing. That is in the extended edition is we see what happens to them, because otherwise it's like, well, what happened to them?
Yeah,
and in the book it's different because they go and they take over the Shire.
Yeah.
So when the hobbits come home, Saruman and Wormtongue are like ruling the Shire.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yes, it's that the biggest arc cut from Return of the King. What do they call it? The Scourging of the Shire or something like that, which is when they go back to the Shire. It's been taken over, and so it's a moment for like the hobbits to rally around and like do their own Hobbit war where they fight off Saruman's people.
Okay, interesting.
And so one problem I always have with this fight with the Ents is when they're like going to it, Treebeard's like, this is the last march of the Ents, and it may be to our doom. And then they show the actual battle, and the Ents just destroy. Like, it's not close. Like, one gets caught on fire, but then he extinguishes himself when they open the dam. I'm like, you guys didn't even take any casualties. You're just, like, hunting orcs around, and it's like, okay, the last march of the Ents, my ass.
Bullet point 10. So right as the movie's ending here, Merry and Pippin, thread C, merges back with thread B, Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas, because they've all kind of won their respective battles and, like, defeated the orcs, but not all of the orcs, I guess. There's still more that we're going to have to deal with in part 3, because otherwise, hey, we're part 2 and we already defeated all the orcs.
Yeah, they defeated Saruman,
right?
Who was the lesser of the two antagonists.
Oh, okay. Right. So he's like the side split off. his army is dead.
Right. In the books, it's more clear that Saruman is like covetous of the ring, and he wants the ring to try and be the actual ruler, but he's also like groveling to Sauron to be like, oh, hey, I'll take down Rohan for you. Because he gets corrupted by looking into the Palantirs, I think is what they're called, which are those crystal balls.
Yeah.
So he gets corrupted by that, and so he's kind of sniveling in his own way, and that he wants to be like, he wants to take the ring for himself, but also is stuck in a position where he's kind of serving Sauron, who he fears. And so yeah, he's the lesser of two antagonists, although he definitely has more.
And he's not just an eye.
Right.
Yeah, although the eye does look cool.
He has a physical body. That's something that has really stuck out to me as I watched these movies more the last couple years, is like, this is the high water mark for the bad guys, is part 2. When Saruman is still in the game, and he's got this army, and like, I feel like if the bad guys had a chance to win, it's here. And so I was definitely thinking of like World War II when, okay, Germany is still around. Like Germany and Japan, you got both. But past a certain point, you know, you've got VE Day. And then you're kind of mopping up. It's like you got to go after Japan, and it could be messy. But that's really what part 3 feels like here. It's like an afterthought.
I can see that, and I think a lot of that is probably based on the specific portrayal of Helm's Deep and how epic it is and how insurmountable it feels. And when they overcome it, you're like, well, if they could win this, then they're going to win the Battle of Pelennor Fields. They're going to win the Battle at the Black Gate and like all this stuff like that. But yeah, I see what you're saying, and that's probably a symptom of the adaptation as much as anything else, where you can't go over, because in the book there's like wars being fought everywhere. Like the dwarves are fighting wars, the elves are fighting in different.
And that's the end of the Two Towers. Tune in soon for part 2 of our coverage of the Lord of the Rings series, where we'll discuss The Return of the King and give some overall thoughts on the trilogy.